Well, hello there, everyone. You hear right here talking about while you were sleeping, and talk about right here of a discussion right here of talking about napping, during the afternoon, or it could be something related to about sleeping, though, right? And you're also want to know too is to where when we talk about sleeping, though. And you're always thinking too that well, while you were sleeping, that it's not really the same thing as working, right? Like everybody else might say that have we thought about that to where that whenever we do wind up oversleeping for any reason, and you're also thinking too is to where that well, really that you don't really want to think about being late a lot of times. That whenever you're trying to get somewhere, within certain times, something like that. But a lot of times it sure seems that way. That each time I think about that, it's like, well, while you were sleeping, that you're not really working, but then at the same time, it's like, that it's just another way of how to, be surprised. How to be surprised. And most of the time, and for sure that most of the time that sure seems that way, that's usually the case, is that when we're talking about is to where that whenever it comes to understanding about dreams and then surprises and a lot of that. But another way I can also think about it is to where that when we are sleeping, that we are dreaming, right? And a lot of times it sure seems that way, that when we do dream about things, that we see and hear things that are not really happening. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, so if you were to be talking to anybody about a dream that you had recently, and let's just say that if you were actually talking to a friend of yours or somebody in your dream, and you started a conversation with them, and you're always 102 is to where that you would maybe think that if dreams were measured by maybe 3 or 4 different subject matters, and let's just say that if one of those would be is this to where that well, most of them are all pretend, and that most of them don't make any sense either. But it sure seems that way, that each time we think about it, dreams, though, it's like, well, really that dreams are just something. You may have heard about that, really, because of the fact that most of the time with dreams, that when we dream about things, that we're trying to imagine the things that we look forward to, right? Then compared to the dreams that whenever we're sleeping and we dream about things, and you're always want to know too that they don't really make a whole lot of sense, and that's why that you a lot of times you want to go ahead and write down the details about what you can remember about the dream, and if it didn't make any sense, or like everybody else, I say that you feel more comfortable talking to somebody about what you see and what you can remember about the dream and all that. But a lot of times it sure seems that way, that each time we think about while you were sleeping, that there's been upgrades going on, or there's been that the next like and a lot of times it's usually I can go and put on here usually by 9 a.m. By 9 a.m. that there's the new that new like so far as talking about for the new updates ready to be reviewed. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that go by it says like for the good morning, your good morning caller, or something like that. So it's like a lot of times that's usually what you see too. Talk about for good morning right here. And so it sure seems that good morning, the exclamation point right there. But I tell you one thing, everybody, that it sure seems that way. That each time I think about this right here, and that people are thinking too, is toward it. Well, really, whenever while you're resting, while you're sleeping, you're not really working. So a lot of times you're likely thinking too is that yeah, if you're going to be navigating away from your account, I'm like, let's just say that like everybody else would say too, that is toward it. That yeah, while you're resting, though, that yeah, it's another way of saying is toward it. That it's there was a progress made. It's another way of saying is toward how you're healing and recovering from the issues that you were diagnosed from earlier, and with at the beginning right here at the beginning right here. I'll put right here for the beginning. But I'll tell you one thing, everybody, that whenever it comes to understanding about dreams, though, and all that, and you're always want to know too, is that especially whenever it comes to technical failures and everything. So let's just say, like people might even think as to where that there's anything magical about that, to where that while you were sleeping, that maybe a few of these problems that you experienced from earlier had been restored, or like yeah, a lot of them have been fixed. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that when we speak about the diagnostics or anything like that, or anything that you were working on from earlier, and that you're always wanting to know too, is to where that yeah, that really that while you're napping, while you're napping or resting, or maybe while you're even on your lunch break or something like that, then anybody say that that usually means that you're that either you're not focused, or if anything that you're away from your from the work for a certain period of time. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that each time we think about this right here, and you're always wondering to where that yeah, that whenever you are sleeping, of course, that there's stuff on here that you might be reading that maybe that you're just trying to whenever you're fully awake, that you'll be able to recognize the activity for what's going on, right? So that's why it sure seems that way a lot of times, that each time I think about that, though, in like 102, is toward it that whenever you do check on the information, and it's going to maybe say something different from what it said earlier. And a lot of times you're always 102 that yeah, that if you were trying to maybe fill out an application or something like that, and let's just say if you check back within maybe 5 hours later, and it's going to tell you something different, and a lot of times you're always 102 is that yeah. So if you do wind up falling asleep, you're being distracted, over something, whichever it is. But the way I think about it too, though, that each time we think about that about job applications and other problems that come up, and you're always wondering to where that whenever you're going to be sleeping, or maybe if you're going to be which call kind of like on standby. And I guess I can put that right here, is I talk about for standby. And I know, like everybody else might say that, well, what does standby mean right here? Well, what does that mean whenever you say standby? It means is that to be ready, be ready to react when the activity is needed. I can just put that right there, and like everybody else might say, that another keyword in a definition would maybe be a bias toward it, that yeah, if it's react, or if anything, or like the typical yeah, what to do, you can, like whenever you do get that message toward it, please I'm like yeah, like so like yeah, you call for duty or something like that. But the way I think about it too, though, that when we speak about when we do talk about work, though, in general, though, that talk about for standby, that you're also thinking too, is that whenever it comes to understanding about our work, though, that when we're talking about work that we're working on, and you're also thinking too that that whenever you do, if you do wind up like everybody else might say that while you were working on this application, that you wind up, yeah, like everybody else might say that you wind up maybe going outside for a few minutes just to check up on something, or you may wind up having, go to the bathroom or something like that, or if anything, you wind up dozing off to sleep, for first few minutes. So a lot of times it sure seems that way. That yeah. So while you were sleeping, does that pretty much mean that you were working at the same time? But like everybody else might say, is that whenever you're resting, though, like everybody else might say, that you're given the programming process time. You're given a time to where whenever the I guess the program you're given that time. Just like and like anybody say that you may have to reset on it, but still but I know with me though that each time I think about this right here, talk about for a while you're sleeping, that the things that you see now, that it's like it's not the same thing as what it said earlier. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that whenever you're going to be working on something, would it maybe make more sense to think about as to where that, well, really, that do you really have to just take your mind off of all the work? Like, everybody say that, well, if you don't take breaks every now and then, like, let's just say that after 2 hours of working on something, if you don't take a break from it, then for sure it's not going to say something for what you like it to say, something like that. But I tell you one thing though, that when we speak about dreams though, and while you were sleeping, that you're always thinking too, is to where that what does that usually mean when we do have those dreams a lot of times, and those dreams are going to maybe be telling us about us, is that a friend, somebody that you've been waiting to meet, or somebody like that, or it could be about a discussion that you had with somebody, or something that that never happened. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that when we dream about things that you probably want to talk about. So let's just say that if you were speaking, you were talking, to this person in your dream. You were talking to this person in your dream, and what you remember telling them in your dream. I'm like, that talking to them about the job or something like that, or maybe was it about the fact about talking. Well, I'm like, I've had quite a few dreams about something like that, but I guess one example I can probably use would probably be about, is that the class. The classroom or something like that. The classroom. During the assignment, talking about how well it went, and how much you learned. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that when we do think about dreams, though, and you're probably thinking as toward it, with most dreams, whenever you have them, and you're also thinking too is toward it, a lot of them that don't make any sense, but it's like, while you were sleeping, that there's been upgrades going on, or we went ahead and took care of, like, most of the time it seems like it's over a problem that was a problem from earlier that finally got resolved. So a lot of times it seems like we got restored futures, for restored and resolved. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that for any reason at all, that we might think as toward it, yeah, well, really, do you really have to be asleep, just for something like, yeah, so you're just waiting for something to be restored and resolved, so that way you can go ahead and move on to the next steps. And so a lot of times you always want to know too, that do you think that if anything that might apply to most applications? Do you think that maybe that might apply to a lot of the other things that we work on, like on a weekly basis or something like that, to where that you really, and like I know everybody else might even say that if you got a lot going on and you're just kind of like scrambling and all, but it sure seems that way, that while you were sleeping, that this is what's been worked out and arranged and all that. So really, could we really ask that question to where that do you see more progress? The say by or just say with more sleep, the more sleep and breaking and the break points, compare that. Yeah, compare that to where if you work overtime. So it sure seems that way, that overtime though, right? And so that's why it sure seems that way, that if you want to kind of put that into like a scenario, right? And you're always 102 is to where that the chances of you getting the job done correctly, and then knowing exactly what is it that you're doing and how you're doing it and all that. And that's why it sure seems that way, that well, really, while you're sleeping, that you're not really working, right? But like everybody else might even say, that do you think it's possible that when we talk about I don't know if you want to give it like any particular name, but what you're basically doing is you're setting you're setting your devices toward it, certain updates. You're actually setting your, I'm like, yeah, so I'll just put on here a schedule, but setting the schedule to where that a lot of the important updates, anything, while you're away from the system, maybe while you're away from your account and all that, that there's updates, and then there's also other things to check out and explore, and then as well as waiting for this to be installed, and something like that. And that's why it sure seems that way, that you're always want to know too, that whenever you do, if you're going to be away from you're away from the system, or like anybody else will maybe say that but while you're sleeping, that pretty much means as to where that you're not really working, but then you may not realize and recognize what the activity that's going on. So like everybody else might even say that do you think that it would be more important to know about the math problems and maybe that science project that you were working on from earlier? And I want to know too that, hey, that you were working on something, but then you wind up going to sleep. You wind up falling asleep, and you wake up about maybe you wake up like a half an hour later, and want to know what all this stuff right here is. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that each time we think about that though, is that just be surprised, right? But then also it sure seems that way, that you probably maybe 102 is toward, okay, well, how is that done and all that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that when we think about sleeping though, that are we necessarily thinking about working, or we necessarily think about it as toward, well, sleep sleep is good, especially if you're trying to recover from something. If you've been maybe if you have been sick a couple of days or something like that. So it sure seems that way. That each time we think about this right here, and that you go by like the sleep schedule, and to where that there are certain times whenever you're working during the day, but then at nighttime, that's whenever that that you set that the system, you set the computer system to to standby, and so that's why it sure seems that way. That each time we think about that though, and what I'm thinking too is toward it. Really, are you really even working while you're sleeping? And so it sure seems that way. That well, you're dreaming most of the time, right? But at the same time, it sure seems that way that whenever you are going to be sleeping, that you're going to be dreaming about things. And but I just really think too that recovering from the issues that were diagnosed from earlier. So a lot of times it sure seems that way. Each time we think about that, though, is toward it that while you're working on something, and let's just say that whenever something doesn't want to work right away, that's whenever you'll get mad at it and all that. But let's just say that on average, though, that they say is to where if anything, you can go and reprogram the system, restart, reboot the system, or if anything, take a break from it for a few minutes. And but it sure seems that way that when we do think about sleeping, though, that do you think that a lot of the work in progress is all also related to about the fact about that being surprised about it. So let's just say that if whatever you're working on something, and maybe that a surprise is supposed to be something that maybe you don't expect, you did not expect to be there, or well, if that's very impressive, or something that you thought by all in the thought or something like that, or just you say something that you were really impressed about. And so that's why it sure seems that way that talk about for scheduling, and also be impressed. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that each time I think about that, though, and always want to know too is to where that with a lot of stress and anxiety and everything going on, and you're all thinking too is that while you're working on something, that you may think that overtime is really the best option, just because that you're trying to get something done, and you're just you're not really thinking about for how long it's been since you've been working on this, but on this assignment and all that. So that's why it sure seems that way that people might say is toward it. If you want to put that into like an equation right here, to where if you spend if you do wind up spending about 5 hours total, and I can just put how many minutes would that be? I could put on here 500 minutes, something like that. I'll say on average that I'll just use that. Put that like So if we were to put that into like a word problem right there, and 102 that 500 minutes. Well, what proof do we have right here, and just like this source of syllable right here? What source of proof do we really have right here that indicates about is to where that the progress that was made so far as the way I'm looking at that, like the way it's highlighted, like in bold right there, looks like to me just a little bit like I like the ingredients, like the milligrams or something like that. So each whenever I think about that, for 500, like not for milligrams but for minutes, but each time I think about that, though, and we're also 102 that when we do think about the amount of time that we put in for something, and you're 102 that whenever you are while you were sleeping, right? And so I say this toward it, what is automatically done for us. Yeah, well, what is automatically done? So I know, like everybody else might even say, that with all these electronic devices nowadays, that you would more likely want to know too, that how would you how would something be automatically done for you? And a lot of times it sure seems that way. A lot of times it seems like it goes by the activity right here. So it's like, first of all, that I think it would go by is the menu. You go to menu, and then you would go to menu slash and go by menu slash and then something like that, and then settings. But it sure seems that way that each time we think about putting this into like a word problem or something like that, and you're always 102 that really that whenever it comes to understanding about programming, though, and you're all 102 that hey number one, that like if it was really in the original plan, or if anything, that what you really are trying to do is trying to get a better understanding about what's going on, right? But a lot of times it's like, really that if you were, while you were working on something, and let's just say that while you're working and maybe while you're writing something down, then you might see that something is automatically done for you. Like, well, those spots were not there before. So half the time it seems like, that what you basically are, or like, the program is actually modifying, I guess. And I'm like, modifying. I can just put on here for modifying. And well, what does modify pretty much means? This means is toward it the software or program, software or program is reviewing your activity. So while I'm typing here, and like everybody else say, you may have to make sure it's set correctly on the version that you're using. But it sure seems that way that each time we think about that, though, is that while the more time did you spend on something, maybe for the first 500 minutes or so. Let's just say that if you were to, 500 minutes, 500 minutes, that's about 5 hours total, right? Something like that. So the first 500 minutes out of a week or so that you spend working on something, and U102s to where, well, a lot of times that's usually what happens, is that you see the things that are automatically done for you, compared to the things that you're having to do manually, right? And so that's why it sure seems that way, that when we go back and look at our work right here, and we might see that right here is toward, you actually see that that part of this equation was already solved for you. It's like, while you were sleeping, when we sleep, we dream, right? And so a lot of times you always want to know too that can you really put that into like any sort of scenario to where you have like that, maybe have it underlined or something like that, while you were, when, where, how, that happened or something like that. But every time we think about that, though, and you're always want to know too that do you want to kind of call it like maybe a pronouns or a verb or vocabulary, any sorts of wording like that. But the way I think about it too, though, that each time we think about that, though, and you're warned toward when we sleep, we dream, and so that's why it sure seems that way, that thinking is toward it. Well, really, that you're not working, and so I can maybe put on here is to where we dream, but we are not working. We are not working, but the work in progress. Yeah, the work is still in progress. So it should, yeah, progress. So it sure seems that way. That first of all, it's like, does that progress really have to be, had to be scheduled and and planned? Like yeah, like everybody else might even say that, and for sure that they talk about for the functions and all that, but still that. But the way we think about this right here with the program, that do we really have to schedule a time where we can actually set that progress to where that the progress is made when the more one part of the day where we spend at least 500 minutes working on something, but then the next day the part of this progress has already been done for you. So it's like it's another way of how you want to kind of call it, like the boost, or if anything, it's like yeah, the step forward or something like that. But a lot of times, every time I think about that though too, is toward yeah, well, really that how often we can say, like anybody say, yeah, well, of course, whenever you do oversleeping, and you want to know too that maybe if you get behind on schedule, if you don't wake up on time, and thinking too that hey, that I want to know is toward that what you still got up follow up with and all that, but the way I think about it too, though, that when we do think about sleeping, though, that while you were sleeping, that this is the progress that was made, right? And so that's why it sure seems that way. That every time I think about this right here, that I'm always thinking is toward it. That a lot of the diagnostics and all that stuff, a lot of the problems, technical issues that occurred from earlier, and that year 102 is toward it. That yeah, if everything is working fine now, then you probably won't even need a lot of this information right here. And if anything, I'm like, yeah, if the problem's been fixed, been restored. But on the other hand, that each time we think about that though, and 1 is toward yeah, that while you were sleeping, that there's been what's called surprises that took place. But one of those surprises will be is toward yeah, well, really whenever you were first work on that, nearly 5 hours ago, that it may have told you something different, than compared to now. So that's why it sure seems that way. That each time we think about that, though, and 102, hey, that did the problem ever get resolved? And but it's like yeah, that. But on the other hand, that when we talk about when we sleep, we dream, and then we are not working, but on the other hand, the work is still in progress. So what does that mean right there? Well, really, that you really do you really just have to have a set schedule to where that schedule the time where you can actually the next time you visit the account, or the next time that you get on get on the computer or the Mac or any device that you do have, just to work on the information that you're working on, right? And that's why it sure seems that way. That each time we think about this right here, and you always want to know too that while you were sleeping, that that pretty much means is toward that you're not really focused on what you were working on from earlier. So it's like yeah, if especially at the especially if you got to respond to a message, or especially if you're having to answer a call or something like that, somebody's trying to call you, or send you a message, and they're waiting for you to respond about something. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that you always want to know too that yeah, well, while you're sleeping, that you need to make sure that you are able to focus mainly on the fact, I'm like yeah, putting it in sleep mode toward it, that allowing it toward it, that that you're giving up, like, yeah, while you're sleeping, that you're resting, right? And but then also that you're allowing the system to also rest too, and so that way that any updates that are ready whenever they do it, download and ready to be installed, and then they can install, right? But at the same time, it's like another thing I want to talk about. Say that, yeah, do people like you better whenever they drive you crazy? But the way I think about it too, though, that talk about responsibilities and disability, the ability to learn at your own task. But still, but half the time you're always wanting to know too is toward it really what is really getting done while you're sleeping, and you're also want to know too that while you were sleeping that there's been updates, or there's been that while you were sleeping that you're trying to remember some of the things that you were working on from earlier, and so that's why it sure seems that way. That do you think that maybe like everybody else might say that it seems like that there's more results in the fact about that whenever you do take a break from the work, from what you were working on from earlier, than compared to putting more overtime in and maybe putting putting a lot of energy into the work that you do. So a lot of times you may want to know too that 500 minutes is the maximum amount of time that you should spend on working on a job, right? Up to 500 minutes. So, yep, you say that after 500 minutes, then you need to take a lunch, or if anything, you need to take at least 2 hours, rest for 2 hours or something. So a lot of times it's like they say that, really that after you spend 500 minutes working on something, and for sure that what progress has made, and especially that if you're going to maybe be away for a couple of hours or something like that, what's done automatically. But it sure seems that way. That it's all about, it's like we and here and that, but still. But on the other hand, it's like it took over for the classroom, during the assignments, but anyway, the things that you learned, right? But that there was progress that's made, and it is another way of how you want to cause is toward of healing and recovering from the issues that you experienced from earlier, and with at least the beginning. And when we sleep, we are dreaming, and when we dream, we're not really working, but the work is still in progress. So that's just something to think about when we talk about for sleeping. But still that on the other hand, that you're always want to know too that how embarrassing it is when we think about that, to where if we wind up falling asleep during that interview, and thinking too is to where that are you even listening or something. So like anybody say that somebody's asking you a question, and let's just say that if you don't respond right away, then chances are like, well, if the person's asleep, then for sure they're not really aware that you're trying to talk to them, that you're asking them a question. But it's like you want to know too that if it's called sleep deprived or something like that. But the way I think about it too, though, that really it's that whenever you do sleep, though, that you're also thinking, like everybody else might say, that really, you can still be thinking and sleeping, and still thinking about it as to where that what's the best option, what's the best opinion whenever it comes to getting the job done. But like everybody else might even say that taking down notes, or maybe think of a good agenda for what to try, what's next to try, something like this or something like that. But still. But on the other hand, we probably thinking too is that while you were sleeping, that there's been surprise, that there's been some stuff that a lot has improved, since last time that you visited your account, and so it's like, so it sure seems that way. It's all about being surprised. And it's all about being surprised. Rather than thinking about getting too far behind, it's all about being surprised of the progress. Right? But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.